I don't know, John. I guess, the one thing parallel I found to the Patriots, I guess it's the Spurs in basketball, the UConn women who have won 10 championships. But, I mean, their level of winning the championship better, but it's unbelievable that this team is here 8 in a row and, 13 times in the last 20 years?
Yeah, pretty amazing 2-decade run. Obviously, it starts with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. I think you look at that organization. I think they're the best of all time, coach and quarterback. I've said it for a while now, and because if you think about sort of the other candidates for that, different eras, you didn't have free agency. You didn't have this turnover. So we see how difficult it is. We just lived through it. The Eagles talk about it, the grind it was to play into February, beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, show up, start playing again, try to make the playoffs again. They ultimately did it, won a game. The Patriots do this every single year, and they make deep playoff runs. It is unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah, and how many times – I mean, I know we don't know the matchups like right off the top of your head or anything, but it seems that a lot of those times they don't have the more talented roster.
No, I would say it's been that way at least for the past couple of years, and it's certainly true this year. I mean, Kansas City has much more talent than they do. And I point back to Jason Kelsey's famous quote now, when he was talking to Sports Illustrated after winning the Super Bowl, and he was talking about watching the film of Minnesota in the NFC Championship game, and they said, damn, those guys got some players. And then they beat the Vikings, and they were watching the film of the Patriots, and they said, damn, those guys got some coaches. It's not a really talented group. And if you look at the 4 teams still left, they're number 4 from a talent perspective.
So this kind of goes to the question I asked you yesterday about how much those other coaches matter. The coordinators get a lot of the pub, but the other coaches.
Well, I'll tell you what. Look at the difference between the Bill Belichick coaching tree and the Andy Reid coaching tree. One of the things people have said about Belichick and why his assistants have ultimately failed as head coaches, for the most part, is because he is a micromanager. And if you remember Josh McDaniels originally taking the Indianapolis job and then backing out and going back to the Patriots, one of the things that sort of lured him back was the promise to let him in on the secrets and open up the kingdom for him, so to speak. I don't know if they've done that. I don't know if it's true, but I mean, history says Andy has better assistants and gets them better prepared for head coaching jobs. Belichick kind of does it himself.
I was going to say, the secret sauce here is that's how much better Belichick is than everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. And I just look at the way they play. And, Mike, you'll hear this numerous times. You've heard Jim Schwartz say it. You've heard Doug Peterson say it. You've heard every coach in this league say it, and they say it a lot. Ever since 2011, when the current CBA was put into effect and practices off-season, in-season were dramatically scaled back, everybody talks about simplifying things. Everybody talks about making things as easy as possible so the players can play fast and they're not thinking. Belichick is the only coach in this league that shifts from week to week. He will play a completely different brand of football if he sees something, a weakness in his opponent. And hey, you just saw it against the Chargers. The Chargers used the 6 and 7 defensive backs against the Ravens, and they were able to win. Belichick sees that on film. He's running fullbacks out there. Half of these teams have no idea what to do with a fullback in modern NFL football. If you go back to the first Super Bowl that the Patriots won over the Eagles, they completely changed their defensive front. Andy Reid showed up, expected one thing, he got another. You don't see this from other coaches in this league, and it speaks to two things, I think. It speaks to the trust he has in the players, but also the willingness to teach his players different things and the confidence to do it. I don't see that with other coaches.
By the way, Belichick and Reid, 6 wins for Belichick over Andy, 2-0 in the playoffs. They'll face each other here in the AFC Championship game. When we talked yesterday a lot about who's number 2, I think Andy is in that conversation, but he hasn't been able to get that one. Do you view Andy as a guy who's is he Marty Schottenheimer, or do you think that ultimately he is good enough and equipped to win the big game?
No, I think Andy is a Hall of Fame coach. I think he's one of the best coaches of all time, to be honest. And I think, unfortunately, he has done it in the era of Bill Belichick. In a lot of ways, I compare it to Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan's era in basketball. I don't think people realized how good Charles was because arguably the greatest player of all time was sort of blocking him from being the best player. I think arguably the greatest coach of all time has sort of been in the same era of Andy Reid, and people haven't respected Andy for what he's done. I think one Super Bowl would change that. I think he's in the best position ever to get it. We'll see if he can get it. But look at Andy Reid's coaching tree, as I just mentioned. It is unbelievable. And going into these playoffs, I got a chance to talk to Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy, two of those branches on that tree, about what Andy does and how he develops coaches and how he gets them ready to be head coaches in this league. You can hear the respect. You can hear what he does to help them and become the coaches that they've become. He is an unbelievable coach. He's just not Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm. We kind of debated around with this yesterday. I think, for me, Andy is in the conversation right now in the league of who's number 2. I don't think there's a definitive answer there. There's a couple of candidates. You got your Pete Carrolls, Mike Tomlins, Harbaugh, Sean Payton. These guys have won the Super Bowl. McCarthy, Gruden, Payton, Tomlin, Carroll, Harbaugh. Do you rank Reid ahead of those Super Bowl winning coaches?
Yeah, I do. I put him at number 2. I think he's the best coach. I had an opportunity early in my career to cover Dennis Green in Minnesota, and people would say that same thing. If you look at that first Dennis Green staff, the offensive coordinator, actually it was his second offensive coordinator, but nonetheless was Brian Billick, and his defensive coordinator was Tony Dungy. Both of those guys went on to win Super Bowls. Denny never got a Super Bowl. And I've talked to both of those guys. They would never even insinuate they were better coaches than Dennis Green. So I understand. Look, this is a results-driven, oriented business, and ultimately the goal is to win the Super Bowl. But if you break things down from year to year, and somebody's able to win one, it doesn't necessarily make them better than great coaches who have done it consistently and always put their teams in position. That's exactly what Andy Reid has done. He did it here for years. He's done it in Kansas City for years. The consistency, that's what marks a great coach, to put yourself in that position. Because people don't like to hear the term luck, but you can win a Super Bowl if everything falls your way. In a lot of ways, you need that in a particular year.
Definitely.
Eagles will admit that from last year. A lot of guys, that things broke their way, and some strange things happened. But when you're consistently building contenders year after year after year, that's when you know you got a really good coach.
These two teams scored 83 points in the regular season. Do we see a similar game, or does playoff football mean Belichick football mean defensive game?
Well, I think the weather, it's not going to be as cold as they originally thought, but it's still going to be not the nicest day in the world. So I think that trends to maybe knocking down some of the offense. But, this is the first time in NFL history in the Super Bowl era that the top 4 scoring offenses are in the championship game. So you can officially say this league has shifted, and it's about the offenses. And to me, all 4 of these offenses are really, really good. So it's going to be on Sunday.
Which, John, is weird because last year, Minnesota, Jacksonville, to some extent Philadelphia, and you could always put the Patriots were our defensive-oriented teams.
Yeah, I agree. But remember all the changes in this offseason. That's how quickly it happened. It's been trending that way. But then they kind of jumped over the cliff in this offseason. As far as some of the rule changes, how they're calling the game, how they make it easier for offenses. It's changed that dramatically in 1 year, and I don't think it's going back. Now, you look at these particular teams you mentioned, none of them have great defenses. So to me, it's going to be the one defense that kind of shows up on a particular game day that probably makes the difference. And people might talk about that defense on as we get towards the Super Bowl and how well it played. But guess what? If you didn't have those offenses for the 16-plus games, you wouldn't be there. So I think that's how the game has changed.
Eric Berry's going to play, by the way. How's that change things? You talk about defense. Does that make a big difference for the Chiefs? I know he's great, and when he's good, when he's healthy and good, he's a great player. But does that tip the scale? Is that a move? Like, I think Eddie Jackson not playing in the Bears game maybe tips the scale to Philly to win that game. If he plays, who knows? Maybe the Eagles can't score on that final drive there. Is this a similar situation? Berry in, different game. Berry out, different game?
Well, I don't think so. Maybe Eric Berry at the height of his career.
Okay.
Maybe Eddie Jackson, I kind of agree with you, but he's coming off an all-pro season. He had an all-pro year, whereas Eric Berry has been dealing with the injuries, has barely played. It helps them because they've had a lot of issues at the safety position without him, so they're better. I think the bigger thing for Kansas City, and the reason I'm picking them in this game, is their defense, as many sort of rocks as they take in criticisms, if you look at the splits, they're really, really bad on the road, but they're above average at home from the numbers. They played pretty well at Arrowhead, and that's why you play for that number 1 seed. And I think ultimately that's the difference in this game. I think it's funny. Jets fans always this time of the year remind me that Mark Sanchez has more road wins in the playoffs as a starting quarterback than Tom Brady.
We talked about it earlier, John.
Actually,
the last team to make the AFC Championship game that did not include the Patriots, the Jets made it back-to-back years.
Yeah, and those were the Sanchez years, and they did it both, and they won. Won the 4 road games.
Years. They're the Sanchez years.
Yeah, and Tom only has 3 road playoff victories as a starter. Now, part of that reason is because they're never on the road. They're always playing at home. So that's sort of been one of the keys to the Patriots' success. But it does tell you it's really, really hard to win on the road in the playoffs, and we just saw it last weekend. No upsets again. All 1 seeds, all 2 seeds.
It's going to turn into the NBA here, all chalk.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little bit different because you have different teams, except for the Patriots every year. They're the one constant.
And oddly enough, John, the Patriots, I didn't realize this, because the Chiefs, you don't think of them as inept. I mean, the Chiefs have always kind of been like a team that wins in the regular season, but They have only been in this game twice. That's it. 2 times. They have 4 playoff
they're
wins.
the one team that has kind of had struggles at home on the playoffs, but rarely have they had the number 1 seed. Rarely have they been this good. The quarterback throwing 50 touchdowns. Mahomes is going to be the MVP of this league. The explosiveness. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. You can imagine how good they would be if they still had Kareem Hunt.
Good for them, though, right?
Maybe. Yeah, but that's a significant hit from a football perspective. Obviously, they had to do it, and maybe that gives the Patriots some hope. But when you look talent-wise, man, the Chiefs are just better. They're just better.
All right, we'll get your picks on the game in a minute. I want to go to the other game real fast. Am I wrong to say I think the Saints win this one going away?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be chalk. I think the Saints, the number 1 seed, are going to win. I think part of the reason is they did not play well against the Eagles, and I don't think they're going to play that poorly again. Drew Brees has never lost a postseason game at home. That place is really, really difficult to play in. And I think you still have some learning to do from Jared Goff's perspective, being in a spot like this for the first time, and Sean McVay as well. I think they're going to have they still have some time on that learning curve.
And I think, I look at, you just said it, the Saints did not play a great game last week, and I think they got off to a slow start, and as that game went on, they seemed like they got it under them. But I just like, the first time they played, it was such a back-and-forth game, but the game is different in the playoffs, and I think that favors the Saints here. But the Rams the last couple of weeks have kind of figured out that maybe they're more of a power team than they are this, greatest show on turf-esque type of team.
Yeah, well, it's weird. When they got, it's strange to say because everyone will tell you how good Todd Gurley is, and they're correct. He's a heck of a player, but he's a more well-rounded back. He can do a lot of different things. They bring in C.J. Anderson. They got this big downhill bowling ball of a runner. And remember, for all the talk, people think the Rams spread you out and they play a ton of 11 personnel. That's what they want to do. But nobody play actions more than the Rams. What they want to do is heavy play action. And if you have a running back like C.J. Anderson who's just pounding you up the middle, what does it make it easy to do? Play action. So since he's been there, they've actually been better doing what they want to do. So he's only helped them, and that's one of those in-season pickups. We talk about Cre'Von LeBlanc and what he did for the Eagles. It's kind of what C.J. Anderson has done for the Rams. He's been a guy that got off the street that has been a huge impact on that team.
Yeah, LeBlanc will go down as one of the great in-season pickups.
And the great names as well.
Real quick on LeBlanc, is he signed for next year? Is he back?
Yeah, he's
part of their plans.
He's still a young. They have so many injuries, and remember, Jalen Mills will be back. It remains to be seen. I think the injury to Ronald Darby, I think that helps the Eagles in a way if they want to re-sign him, because I think he was going to get a lot of money. And maybe that's scaled back. So maybe they're back into Ronald Darby discussions. And also Sidney Jones, remember, he's going to be a big part. So they have all these guys potentially, certainly Jones and Mills coming back, even Darby. You got Rasul Douglas. So at some point, numbers become an issue. But I definitely think they look at – we haven't even brought up Avonte Maddox as well. So they have a lot of depth at that position when they get healthy, but LeBlanc is a guy who opened a lot of eyes, and he opened Jim Schwartz's eyes, so he's going to be given every opportunity to be in that slot corner conversation next year.
How well the Rams can run the ball against the Saints, that's important. Jared Goff in his career, he's 17-0 as starting quarterback with the Rams rush for at least 120 yards, 8-15 when they need to basically lean on him. That's something to watch in this game, and I think the Saints, Mosher on Monday's show, I want to see if you agree with this. He felt that the Saints actually had a better defense than the Bears did.
What? Maybe they. What? Wait a minute. No, he's insane if he thinks they have a better defense than the Bears. The Bears had the best defense in the NFL.
He said that's a lot because of their pass rush. That it's
of course
better.
It's their pass rush.
Right.
That's a big part.
Because I was surprised to hear that because it's like I didn't hear a lot of people talking about that.
I'm gonna yell at Jeff for this. That is insane. And remember, Sheldon Rankins got hurt against the Eagles, so he's not going to be able to play. They're further impacted because that's arguably their best defensive lineman. You could say Cam Jordan, but they were 29th in the NFL in pass defense. You can throw the football against that team. Marshawn Lattimore had a bad year compared to his rookie season, but he had a big game against the Eagles, so maybe he's trending back in the right direction. But that Bears defense, that was the best defense in the NFL, and it wasn't all that close. So I don't think you could say anybody is better than that defense this year.
All right, who do you like?
I like the Saints because it's so difficult to win at the Superdome, but I do think it'll be a close game, and I do think, as I just explained, the Rams will have some opportunities to throw the football down the field. Ultimately, I think Jared Goff makes a game-changing mistake. Just a young quarterback learning on a big stage.
Patriots, Chiefs?
I got the Chiefs. Andy's going. He'll have his opportunity to finally get that Super Bowl win. I just think there's too big a talent disparity. It's difficult for me. I just gave you all the reasons that Bill Belichick, in my opinion, is the greatest coach of all time. I think it's amazing he's got this team back to this position again, and I just think he loses out on a talent deficiency.
You think Andy is on the phone with Doug?
Yeah, I'm sure they text at the bare minimum. I'm sure he kind of picks his brain as all friends do in this league and all coaches, but I don't think that'll make a difference. Andy has faced off against Bill Belichick enough times to understand what he's up against.
6-2 he is.
And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think Belichick always pretty much out schemes who he's coaching against. But sometimes, as you saw in the Super Bowl, sometimes you don't have the horses.
Johnny Mac, AFC, NFC championship games right here. 97.3 ESPN. Our coverage begins Sunday at 2. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Mike.